What's up, guys? Welcome to the Saturday show. Now, on Saturdays, I like to go back through the week of Newswave and talk about everything. We pretty much went through the big stories for the week and see what you guys had to say down in the comments. It's a lot of fun to read through them and pick some out to respond to, and I think we'll have a lot of fun today as a bunch of stuff happened throughout the week, whether it's the NES games that were pretty much discovered on the Switch, or, of course, EA and Star Wars. That's a whole thing on its own at this point, with more stuff coming out. We're going to go over some of, I guess, the aftermath that's taken place since that story broke as well. As always, guys, enjoy these videos with the like button. It does help out. We're actually going to start today with a little piece of news, or I guess maybe a tease. It probably won't surprise you too much, as if you remember, we talked a bit about this series probably going to the Switch because of THQ Nordic, who's, again, porting everything to the Switch and even the other systems at this point, and that is Darksiders. Now, if you saw this on Twitter, it was pretty funny because you could tell they were having a bit of a banter back and forth ahead of what appears to be an announcement of some kind. I'm not sure which Darksiders is going there at this point, but they didn't. All right, so they did an all right job, I guess, trying to pretend like it was nothing, but here's some of the Twitter thread here. I mean, you can pretty much see Darksiders and then THQ Nordic kind of coming in here. And Darksiders, for example, we did not start the apocalypse early, nor did we prematurely talk about an upcoming game. That was in response to it possibly going to the Switch that was asked by Jason. And it just continues on from there, down further and further and further, and they're just, again, having a good time. Is it surprising that something like Darksiders would go to the Switch? Not really. I mean, like, Darksiders 1 and 2 is probably something THQ Nordic's been thinking about for a while, and sure, it was on the 360 and, yeah, PS3, so you would expect that the Switch would handle it no problem. The question is, what about Darksiders 3? I think that game could actually see quite a few sales on the Switch if they could move it over, as people have pretty much stopped talking about that game. I thought it was all right. The game overall was Darksiders. They patched it recently, and that's actually turned it more into Darksiders than Dark Souls. So if they did something like a collection for the Switch, or even if they brought 1 and 2 over first and then ported the third one over, because it'll probably take more time anyway, by the end of the year, I think that'd be good as well. But definitely move Darksiders over. It was a fun series on the 360. I played it a lot. The first one, I know people like the second one a lot, but I really do like the first one. So if they move those two over in a package or even separate at cheaper prices, then get the third one over, I think it'll actually help with sales. And of course, THQ Nordic is no stranger to porting just the most random stuff. I mean, Sphinx is coming to the Switch at the end of this month, and then Saints Row the Third, for whatever reason, I don't know, I guess because there's no Grand Theft Auto on the system, but yeah, THQ Nordic importing, and then Darksiders shouldn't really surprise you if it just pops up on the Switch with an announcement. And starting the week on Monday, we talked about Super Nintendo games that were data mined from the Nintendo Online application, and the code found in the current NES application are titles for 22 Super Nintendo games that include, of course, Super Mario World and Zelda: A Link to the Past, but also includes Breath of Fire 2, by the way. With more information coming out as the week went on, it appears that Nintendo is poised to add the 16-bit system to the Switch library. Matt says, "I don't understand why people are so excited for SNES games on Switch. If you got the SNES Classic, a 3DS, or an emulator, you are pretty much set. I would prefer GameCube and Wii games because they are more difficult to obtain / emulate." That is actually a good point there. I think people are really excited for Super Nintendo games. One, because a lot of people probably bought the year service, so it's just, you know, another thing other than NES games, because I'll be honest, NES games, a couple being added every month is getting kind of boring, kind of stale. I think people are kind of seeing that, and they're like, NES games, like, no one really talked about the most recent ones for January. There wasn't a lot to talk about. Zelda 2, Blaster Master, I guess, but seeing things like Super Nintendo games pop up alongside of it is a bit more interesting. And then, of course, people understand how Nintendo seems to work with these things, whether it's the classic systems, for example. They, of course, would progress through the years of their systems, and while we believe a Nintendo 64 Classic could be coming this year, we kind of know that, all right, for Nintendo 64 games to show up, they're obviously going to do Super Nintendo games first. So if they need to really grab something and say, you guys need to subscribe, we're coming up on the 1 year, and we need to drop something on here just to make sure people are ready to resubscribe, whether it's a brand new game that comes out on the Switch that makes you want to play online, or N64 games, we have to kind of get our way there, stair-step our way there. So Super Nintendo is probably just the next step on the way to what a lot of people want, which is Nintendo 64. But still, Super Nintendo games being added to the library is just another thing that you get for your subscription service. So I get why people are excited. And also, I bet you there's a lot of people who didn't play Breath of Fire 2, for example, and or Demon's Crest. That's actually a very expensive game. So yes, emulators are cool, but I do know there's a lot of people who probably just want to have it on their Switch and it just work. Tuesday we saw New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe top the charts in the UK, surprising many with its strong sales in its first week. We also saw Rocket League get full crossplay between the PS4, Xbox One, Switch, and PC. Young Thunder says, this is honestly bad. I really wanted New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe to sell poorly because of how unambitious it is. We need to send Nintendo a message with our wallets. That message should be, give us more of Breath of the Wild and less of this. First of all, even abbreviating New Super Mario Bros. Deluxe still looks ridiculous in writing or in type. It really is insane how long that title is, by the way. It's actually amazing to me that they were able to fit it on the front of a box. Anyway, why did they leave the U in? Anyway, a lot of people did see that, of course, as a port that they didn't need if they owned the Wii U. However, I also saw several people in the comments say, I didn't have a Wii U, this game was for me, and okay, that makes sense. However, the game definitely was probably the most uninspired from that series, just in general. Of course, a lot of people really liked it on the Wii because it was really cool to see that pop up on the console and everything, and it was 2D Mario, and then the Wii U version, if you look up a lot of reviews, a lot of people's thoughts on it, yeah, it was probably the weaker of the series in general. But still, there are a lot of people who didn't experience it on the Wii U, and I get that. But I also understand people who are getting tired of the ports. The good news is I feel like we're running out of them. I mean, sure, there's still some they can pull, but I feel like we're getting to the end of the ports. And my other thought is there are also ports that people probably wouldn't be upset about if it was ported over, like Mario Maker, but then they port New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe. I do see that as an easier one that can fill in the gaps, and I'm hoping that when they start running out of them, there will just be no ports at all from the Wii U, but we'll see. They definitely have no problem charging a much higher price, but I have to at least give them credit. They are getting sales out of it, so they know what their IPs are worth, and people keep buying into the just Mario in general. 2D Mario sells. I mean, that's the way it is. But I don't think this is stopping them from releasing games like Breath of the Wild. I just understand that those games take a long time to create. Like God of War on the PlayStation took 4 or 5 years to make. Is the way it is. So if this is what they can do to fill in their gaps, that's probably what they've decided to do because of that. So we'll see if they have some bigger stuff planned that we don't even know about yet. And again, we still want to see Metroid Prime 4 being shown off. That's a game that's taking a while to make, and I'm hoping that has a Breath of the Wild type feel to it. What I mean by that is it's going to feel way different than anything else in the series, and it's going to be an eye-opening moment for the series, but we'll see. Wednesday, we saw the internet react to a report put out by Kotaku revealing that EA seemingly had canceled and moved on from the Star Wars game that EA Vancouver had taken over from Visceral Games. The real question now is, will we ever see that Star Wars game that Visceral was working on, and will EA actually be able to put out a Star Wars game that is critically acclaimed? Joseph says, EA is toxic, take away Madden, and they haven't produced much quality in years. It's sad, I used to get excited as a kid when I heard EA, it's in the game. I guess that's what EA Sports, it's in the game. Even that, though, I would argue that Madden hasn't been good in a while. Like, it's been, the excitement, if you remember, back in the mid to early 2000s, definitely in the mid 2000s, there was way more hype around Madden when a new one would come out. I remember Madden 2005 was like one of the biggest hype years at all like overall, because they also had NFL 2K5 right next to it, which released at $20 and forced EA's hand to make theirs $20, which is the last time we really had competition in the football scene. Interesting, right? Yes. So I believe that has more to do with there being lack of competition, if anything. I mean, we see NBA Live be far more competitive with their stuff than Madden. And I would argue that EA hasn't done much outside of even FIFA. It feels kind of lazy at this point as well, because they make a ton of money. And it is a shame, because we used to have EA Games challenge everything, and when you saw that pop up, you kind of felt like you were in for some quality, but that was back during the PS2 and the original Xbox days, and GameCube even, where we had 007, not GoldenEye, but 007 on there. It just doesn't feel quality anymore. And that's just the way it is. I mean, it's a shame, because EA and Star Wars made that deal in 2013 for a 10-year project, and I have to hope that Respawn can really pull them out of this rut with Jedi Fallen Order. But if EA, again, inserts themselves in with microtransactions and season passes and DLC that seems like it could have been in the game, it's not going to really matter. Reese says, why can't Star Wars be licensed out like Marvel? Just get it away from EA. Everybody wants it away from EA at this point, right? No one wants it with EA. I get it. I feel like it would be way better if they could license Star Wars out, but I have a feeling Disney looked at EA and they said, okay, they're big enough to produce tons of games, which might have been a mistake by now, but we'll see, because that 10-year contract isn't up till 2023, and it sounds like EA is going to start pushing more and more Star Wars games out, especially towards the back end of this contract, because we heard that EA Vancouver is actually turning around and they're going to try to kick a Star Wars game out by 2020, which is insane. They're going to try to do it in like 2 years or something, which that seems like that's going to be hard to do. This was reported by Jason Schreier with the follow-up for the Kotaku article, because EA said, well, we're shifting our focus to something else at EA Vancouver, and maybe they'll come back to the Visceral one if they have time. I don't know, we'll see. But yeah, apparently that's going to happen, and the EA is struggling right now to make a critically acclaimed Star Wars game. They really are, and if anything, they're getting nothing but flack for their Star Wars games. And if they show up in fall of 2020 with this half-baked game, and we remember that article where they said they shifted focus and they're going to kick a game out in 2 years, yeah, that'll be fun to talk about, and I'm sure it won't be a firestorm on Twitter and the media. But like I said, right now, we're stuck in this contract. Sure, Disney could break it, probably pay some money, but honestly, Disney probably wanted an easy way to have games produced and only deal with one company, because the approval process, from what I've heard, is insane. Like, they have to check everything through them, right? Whether it's cosmetic stuff or who knows, everything has to run through Disney to make sure it's canon, I guess, with their movies and everything. It's a whole thing. So they probably don't want to go through this studio and this company. Everything goes through EA, and it's just, I guess it's easier to get communication done and get things out faster. But man, is it frustrating to watch EA squander what has been, half of their contract so far, 5 or 6 years now, on just junk. Thursday, we saw analysts change their projections for the Nintendo fiscal year goal after new data seemed to reveal that the Switch may have actually sold nearly 11 million units in the third quarter alone, making that 20 million unit goal seem much more possible. Jim says, I find the way Kojima hypes his games off-putting and frustrating. They don't make me anticipate the game at all. They have the opposite effect. I either am indifferent to them or actively disinterested. I think it's trite and contrived to release esoteric cinematic trailers. They're intended to be profound, but they're just meaningless, and the only reason they're successful is because some people are unable to resist curiosity. I kind of look at this like, whenever I see Kojima, because I used to try to look at Metal Gear Solid 2 stuff in magazines. It was harder back then, okay? Back in like the it was 1999, 2000? I mean, it was still online at the time, but when you got like those nice full print magazines with like information about Metal Gear Solid 2, it was harder back then. I mean, now it's a bit easier because Twitter and interviews all over the place online, popping up every day. And he's trying to make it so we don't know what's going on. Whereas back then, we would hear about his games every few months. And it is frustrating, I'll admit that. He seems to be stuck on what I would call like the Cloverfield effect. Remember that movie? We didn't even see what the monster looked like until the movie came out. But believe it or not, it actually worked okay. Until some people saw the movie and then they got mad and wanted their money back because it wasn't what they thought it would be, I guess. It's an idea to essentially hide what the game or product is, to build hype and interest and, like you say, curiosity. But I think in this day and age when information is streamlined and delivered at like blazing fast speeds now and everyone's getting used to that, I think it's starting to wear thin on people right now with what he's trying to do with this game. And it's also going to build up hype for if the game comes out and it's not great, and people are going to wonder if that marketing strategy is even worth doing anymore, which might actually end up hurting his studio and his, I guess, just him in general in the long run. But we'll see, because maybe Death Stranding will deliver and it'll be amazing, and then everyone's like, oh, let's try that marketing strategy. We'll see. Finally, on Friday, went over the Mortal Kombat 11 reveal that showed off a lot of gameplay and features of the game while still keeping many of the characters under wraps. We also took a look at the confusion around the Switch version that could be delayed in some regions. Mario Taz says MK11 needs to run at 60 frames per second, and that's it gonna happen without a serious downgrade like Doom. So this is, I think, one of the reasons so many people are interested in the Mortal Kombat port for the Switch. Now, it makes sense and it'd be pretty cool because this is actually something I think people maybe who play heavily or competitive might actually buy into the Switch version and, of course, a console version like the PS4, for example, and the Xbox and everything, whereas the hybrid Switch version might work on the go when you're on the move and you can still technically practice, but it has to be in parity when it comes to response time, of course, for input and frame rate. See, with Doom, they could get away with having the frame rate to help out. I'm interested in what they're going to do here. Now, we've seen some games like Dragon Ball FighterZ go to the Switch and still retain 60 frames per second. Actually, still look pretty good, and that's done in Unreal Engine 4, and it appears that Mortal Kombat 11 is also done in Unreal Engine 4, so I guess kinda, maybe Dragon Ball FighterZ is like the best example we have right now. We also have to figure out who's porting it. That's another big question mark. Now, Panic Button doesn't seem to be doing much right now outside, for new projects, outside of Doom Eternal, which I'm sure is a big project, but I was wondering if they were the ones doing it since they actually had experience with Injustice on the Vita. They're the ones who ported that, because I remember Mortal Kombat 9, when that came out on the Vita, it didn't look very good. If you go back and look at actual visuals of that compared to the 360 and PS3 counterparts, didn't look great. Well, that's putting it mildly. It still ran and worked and you could play it, but it wasn't something to look at and go, wow, those are some great looking visuals. But it's going to be very interesting. I think that's why so many people are curious about the Switch version and why the possible delays, those rumors right now are gaining so much traction, because I think some people just flat out can't believe that it'll run on the Switch with any type of, I guess, graphical decency is how we'll put it. But let me know what you guys think about that down below, and if you think they can get Mortal Kombat 11, they've already announced it, so I guess they can, but to the point where it'll be acceptable to the mainstream of most people. Let me know what you guys think about that down below. Ladies and gentlemen, let's go do it here for the Saturday show. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you guys hit the like button if you enjoyed the video, or dislike it if not. Let me know what you think about everything we talked about today, whether it's Darksiders getting teased for the Switch. What do you think about Darksiders coming over? Is that something you like to see? You think it's a collection, or even just 3 straight up? They just bring all 3 of them over? Let me know what you think about that, though, down below. And then, of course, Mortal Kombat 11, what do you think's going on with that Switch version? And then, of course, EA and Star Wars. It's a whole thing there, but let me know down below, guys. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.